going to say good morning, everyone, but it's officially afternoon. So we're so happy that you are joining us today for this kind of lunchtime topic. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Octavia Gilmore. Some of you have probably already attended some of our discussions with her. She's the principal of Nonprofit Talent Solutions at CLA, Clifton Larson Allen. And she's becoming a real go-to resource for us as we talk about the ever-changing employment and hiring and talent market. So Octavia, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Martha, and thank you for inviting Daryl and I to your lunch roundtable. We really appreciate your inviting us. So again, my name is Octavia Gilmore. I'm a principal here at Clifton Larson Allen for our Talent Solutions vertical. So happy to be here with you. I'll go ahead and let Daryl introduce himself, and then we'll kick off our discussion.
Sure. My name is Daryl Reeves. I'm also with Clifton Larson Allen, CLA. I work as a consulting chief financial officer in our Southern California region. So,
excellent. Thank you so much, Daryl. So now I believe that the majority of you, or most of you, were on our previous discussion that was focused on the Great Resignation, right? And how it's impacting the market. Today, we're just going to continue that conversation with some tips to increase candidate attraction for your business office in your school, some onboarding techniques and best practices to retain new and current staff members, right? So let's go ahead and begin by delving into your school's visibility in the market, your external branding, and the culture, which is critical when you're trying to attract, retain your staff within your business office. I'd also like to state that I would love for this conversation to have a lot of dialogue. So if you have any questions, reactions, please put them in the chat, and Daryl is going to be our go-to person for that. So thank you so much, Daryl. So right now, the talent market is truly in an uproar. I think we all know that. We learned that from our previous conversation. So now is like a really good time to start to take a look at your school's culture, your visibility, and your brand. And so I really want us to consider some key factors when we're thinking about hiring new and retaining your current staff. So first and foremost, I want to delve into school branding. There is a huge difference between employer and an employee branding. So I want to just pose a question in the chat first and see who knows the difference between employer branding and employee branding. I'll just give a couple of seconds for that in the chat. And Daryl, you let me know how many hands get raised. The difference between employer and employee branding. So while you all kind of flood your responses in the chat, I'm just going to go ahead and give you high level. So your employer brand is what talent, what your partners, what everyone sees in the market. And that's everything from what is posted on your website, what your financials may look like if they're public information. So all of that constitutes your employer branding. Now, employee branding is something totally different. That's what your current staff are saying about you. And talent can see those type of responses on anywhere like Glassdoor, Indeed. There are also some private sites that allow employees to put input into their chat with regards to how an organization is faring well in terms of how they feel as a staff member. So I think it's important to really delve into that, because if you don't have someone who's looking on Glassdoor and looking at how your school is faring well, that could definitely have an impact in your ability to attract talent to your organization. So I would encourage you to have someone who can kind of delve into that. I want to take a pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions so far about that. Excellent. Next is market comparison. So currently the talent market is the most volatile that we've ever seen, right? As we talked about previously, there are over 10 million jobs available and the resignation rate is at approximately 2.8, 2.9%. So the question that we hear often from our clients is, well, what do other organizations offer that we do not? So just for this topic, I'd like for all of us to start to really kind of think about how you would answer that question, right? What do other organizations offer that we don't? So some things to consider is, how do you compare to other schools in terms of total compensation? And we're talking about everything from benefits to perks to time off. How are you measuring your candidate experience and staff engagement? When is the last time you actually did a staff survey or an assessment of your business office? When is the last time that you've revamped your onboarding process since the pandemic in an effort to increase retention, right? So those are all things that I want us to start to think about. So I'm going to pause there and open up the chat for further discussion, or if anyone wants to chime in, please feel free to do so, as I want this to be as interactive as possible.
So Octavia, just so you know, I'm looking at the slideshow, and because I'm running the slideshow, I'm not seeing a chat box. So Martha, maybe you can see it on your end. I apologize.
I can see the chat box. It's not that active yet.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing
Okay.
anything.
I'm counting on everyone to warm up.
Okay, all right, excellent. So should we move on, Martha? Yes? Sure. Should I continue? Okay, and the last piece is internal environment, right? So as we all know, the pandemic has impacted, schools and higher ed institutions in a very unique way. We always encourage our clients to take an immediate pulse check of your current staff. This will provide you with an opportunity to learn of your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats with regards to the talent that you currently have. And if doing so is too much of a heavy lift and you don't have a designated person to do that, we always suggest that you look for a resource that can possibly help with that assessment. Of course, CLA is one of those resources, but of course, we also ask that you look at, a partner that can help you through this transitional process. And key thoughts to further consider, I think it's important to understand how has the pandemic impacted your culture, not just in your entire school, but in your business office. Did remote work last year have a positive or negative impact on your culture? And if it did, what are some of the ways that you're looking to get some benefits from that in order to kind of revamp the way that you're bringing staff back into schools? And how did you handle resignations? We're hearing a lot from our clients that their business offices are taking a big hit, from bookkeepers all the way up to their controllers. They're seeing lots of resignations. So are you creating career opportunities for others within your business office to help with retention as well? And then I think the last but not least, just kind of thinking broadly, are we being flexible in offering a hybrid work model, right? I know that I kind of touched on that in our previous conversation, but I will tell you, as we're in the market and we're supporting talent efforts for our clients, the one thing that we're hearing from candidates is that if an organization, school, does not have the flexibility of offering some type of hybrid work model, I will tell you, those organizations and schools will struggle with finding talent and also retaining the talent that they currently have. So Darryl, you can go ahead and move on to the next slide if we don't have any questions or comments coming through yet.
I have a question, Octavia. So we're talking about the business office, but this is applicable across the boards, right? I mean, obviously you're more focused on the business office and what you do, but this would apply to any position in any organization that they're seeing, well, in any position in any organization has seen the impact of the last 20 months. So the principles are general principles that you're talking about when you are dealing with sort of accounting and finance staff, but it's everyone.
Yeah, it is across the the board, Martha, and that's a great point that you bring up. You know, it's just not business offices that are experiencing this. It's nonprofit organizations, it's private organizations, it's organizations across the board that are feeling the pinch in their finance and accounting departments. So yes,
And certainly at schools, we've seen this with faculty retention too.
Yes, yes, yes. Thank you for bringing that point up. Does anyone want to share what they're experiencing in terms of retention in their schools, a story or snippet they would like to share with us? Okay. Next is workforce innovation. And so when I think about workforce innovation, I always like to keep the end goal in mind, and that is towards retention, right? So how do we attract, hire, and retain our staff? Is our talent acquisition process inclusive and equitable? First and foremost, when we think about attracting talent, you know, the market has evolved a great deal, right? And so long gone are the days when your website was your only marketing tool, right? You have a website, you talk about the work that your organization does, and you get candidates that flock to your website. But now candidates are seriously focused, you know, on an organization's activity on social media. They want to understand how your organization is networking with other organizations in the same sector, and are you a thought leader? You know, they want to see articles that, you know, your school or your organization is participating in, and those things that really have an impact on what's going on in the world right now. So attracting talent is more than just posting your job, is more than just talking about how great your benefits are on your website. It's about truly being interactive with the market in order to garner more attention. I'll take a pause there.
Can you give us an example of being interactive with the market?
Sure. So the one of my clients, what they do really well is they post like snippets of like podcasts on LinkedIn, right? So if something amazing happens within their organization, they'll have someone go on LinkedIn and do like a snippet video about that amazing thing that happened within the organization. And not only are they utilizing LinkedIn, and I also think it depends on who your audience is too, Martha. So if you're talking about the younger generation, you have to really start thinking about Facebook. You really have to start thinking about Instagram. You really have to start thinking about those social networking sites where possibly, you know, whatever audience you're trying to reach, that's where that audience is going to flock. And then especially on LinkedIn, there are all different types of groups that an organization can become a part of if there are like-minded individuals where the missions kind of correlate with each other. So that's one aspect of the way that I've seen an organization really put their best foot forward and trying to garner attention to their organization. I hope that was helpful.
And it's a year-round thing, right? It's not.
It is. It is, Martha. Yes, you've got it. Yes, it is an ongoing process. And I know initially when organizations start off, when they start thinking about how do we attract talent in a more intentional and compelling way, I think doing something maybe every quarter would be helpful, so that way it doesn't feel overwhelming. But once an organization gets the rhythm, they'll start to identify one person who's going to, you know, kind of lead the charge and what that marketing looks like for the organization. So starting off in quarters and then kind of moving that to monthly, you know, slow and steady definitely wins the race, so that, you know, you don't get overwhelmed.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Martha. And now for onboarding, right? I think we all know that that's such a critical step in retaining talent, right? Specifically the first 90 days. So just kind of thinking out loud, you know, ask yourself, what is your onboarding process, right? Is it competitive with the marketplace right now? And what I mean by competitive, you know, candidates like to be engaged, right? It's important that the process is inclusive and equitable. And it doesn't mean that your hire is siloed to just a department that they're going to be working in, but they have an opportunity to learn about the entire organization, the entire school. So meeting with different people across the organization, learning historical elements about the work that the organization has done is really important as well. And then I think one of the things that a lot of employers miss out on too is that weekly check-ins with new staff members is really important. I think that new staff wants to have a sense of belonging within an organization, specifically because so many organizations have a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative within their organization. Focusing on the inclusion part, I think it's important to understand that you really have to kind of foster that when you're thinking about your onboarding process. And then, facilitating lots of discussions, making sure that, everything that you do from the time that you attract the talent to the time that you hire them to the time that you onboard them, try to be sure that the process is not long and drawn out. It doesn't take 4 to 6 weeks to onboard someone. It should be quick, it should be efficient, and it should be engaging. You want your new hire to come in feeling excited about the opportunity because that increases retention as well. So I think one last point I do want to make is that, candidates perceive the onboarding process direct correlation to your culture of the organization as well. So if the onboarding process is long and drawn out, they feel as though maybe the organization is a bit behind the times, it's not as competitive as other organizations are. So I think that those are some things to take into consideration as well.
Octavia, I have something I'd like to add, if you don't mind. From what I've experienced, I personally like to be in the office. And so what I found post-COVID is it's a different work environment now, because back in the olden days, before COVID, we all went into the office and Zoom didn't exist that long ago. So that wasn't even an option. So all of a sudden now, it's almost like we have 3 or 4 different work environments. It's not just 2. So like you have a hybrid, like I'm in the office all the time, but I'm sitting in an empty building.
Yeah.
It's way different, even though I'm in the office. So I'm not really seeing people. Like I haven't said hi to anybody today. I've been sitting in this office. So it's like you have that work environment opposed to how it used to be when you had a full office and you're conversing with people. So that's 2 scenarios. And then you have the third scenario where you're working at home and you're in your bedroom or your living room and you're just staring at a screen all day. So that's the third work environment. And I'm thinking there's a fourth that's kind of a hybrid between the 2.
Well, I'll complicate it a little bit, because I'm not out of school, but the schools were mostly back. So, however, but we're back differently than we were before. So people are wearing masks and we're having events, but they're different. It just feels different. And I think, it feels better than it did last year at this time when everybody was Zooming in or it was hybrid at that time. So there are a lot of changes, and I do think you're right. It changes the way you communicate, and maybe also how long it takes to build different levels of trust, which is a whole nother topic, right? But, and Octavia, I also have a question. So when we talk about onboarding, that there's onboarding, and then there's like when some places do a really good job of onboarding and then they stop. So I guess that's my question, which maybe gets to retention. So when you have a new employee, when does onboarding become not onboarding, but you still need to touch base with people and check in, and that maybe that gets to belonging?
Yeah, and it also gets to, that's a great point that you make, Martha. I think that the retention process, it's a continuous process, right? Onboarding is just a snippet of what happens in an employee's life cycle right? It's getting them acclimated to the organization and allowing them the opportunity to feel comfortable, and to really kind of learn what the organization is doing aside from what their responsibilities that they were hired for. But the retention process, it never stops, right? The retention process starts as soon as you make your first contact with that candidate. It continues on onboarding. It continues once someone has been with your organization for 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years. Retaining employees is an ongoing process. And I think it's important that we kind of dive into that a little bit. And that's kind of what I wanted to discuss next. So thank you for bringing that up, Martha, right? So, the retaining process means that you have to make sure that you are staying connected to your employees. And I also think it's important to understand at what level of staff are you hiring, right? Because I think that there's a bit of a difference to what some employees need versus the other. And it's what we see in the market, right? So those who are really younger in their career, they really need that heavy engagement. They really need that sense of belonging. They really need that heavy interaction and collaboration. Middle career, employees, you kind of think about that a little bit differently because your priorities shift and they change about what's really important to you in your career. And then more mature employees, I put myself in that category, like our needs and wants are a little bit different. So I think you kind of have to base that kind of interaction on what level of staff that you're actually hiring. I hope that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Daryl, just to your point as well, when we think about, working hybrid, being in office where there's that, full staff kind of, in the office all the time, I also see that there's a difference in that with where someone is in their career as well. I will tell you, again, the younger generation, and not to harp on that, they want that flexibility, right? And then you have your kind of middle of the road, type of staff where it's like, I miss seeing my staff. I want to be a part of them. I want to be in the office. And then you have, other people who are in different phases of their life cycle of their career where it really doesn't make a difference for them, right? As long as the work is meaningful for them, they can work either way. So I think it's really important to have an opportunity to dial into the type of staff that you're hiring.
I also wanted to point out that in the chat, there are a couple of questions, and I just realized my chat screen was on a screen to my right. So I apologize, it's a little late, but I just wanted to make sure I did point out that there are a couple items. One question is, love to hear data on how remote opportunities, flexibilities are generally being offered across schools in California.
That's a great question. Well, in the California region, I would have to dial directly kind of into that because I currently sit on the East Coast, but I would love to continue the conversation and answer that question outside of this discussion right here, because I could definitely get my hands on that data for you. Thank you for the question. Any other questions, Daryl?
There is one. Employee branding feels more like profiling, whereas employer branding is more like image setting. I know that was the last slide, but I wanted to bring it up.
Okay, I'm sorry. Daryl, can you repeat that question again?
Sure. Yeah, it says employee branding feels more like profiling, whereas employer branding is more like image and setting. Setting.
I think that that's an interesting point to make. Because the work that we do in the talent market, it's supporting our clients when they're in need of talent support, and that's by way of executive and professional level searches, right? For a long time, we've seen where organizations have struggled to attract talent, excuse me. And so we really had to dial in and do our own research years ago as to we couldn't figure out what was happening, right? And so once we learned about how other social media sites report about employers, this really gave us a leg into the fact that employees are given the right to talk about the organization that they work for, but in an anonymous fashion, right? So profiling, I think that's an interesting word, but I do know that talent definitely wants to see what current and previous staff say about the organization. That is critical. I will tell you that there have been times where we've partnered with our clients, and because of what the reputation is of the organization based off of employee branding, it was really challenging for them to turn the tide in an effort to get that attraction going with newer type of candidates in the market. So I hope that's really helpful.
I mean,
and I still see it today too.
Glassdoor can be your best friend
Or
or
your
your worst enemy. And I mean, again, it's anecdotal. I have a 27-year-old daughter who is quite savvy about finding jobs. And if she bumps into anything in an interview that rubs her the wrong way, she posts on Glassdoor. And it's, I feel like saying, well, you sure you want to do that? But she's sure. And just Tyler, to follow up your question, I think when we get to the inclusive and equitable practices, some of the remote discussion, remote flexibility will be, I know that we at Cal-ISBOA have had a lot of discussion around how remote opportunities work at schools. Because there's a lot of schools that you know, if you're a student facing, you really can't work remotely. So then it gets into the discussion of equitable practices. So I think more to come on that. And I will say that the HR group that meets on Wednesday afternoons has had fairly regularly, they talk about that issue. So you can feel free to join us.
Oh, great. Yeah, and I think that that's also a great point, Martha, right? When we think about equitable practices, right? It's a fine line, right? Because let me just give an example. So let's just say, oh gosh, a train operator, right? A train operator, their role is to drive the train, and they are interacting with the public. Right? They are interacting with the public. Clearly, that person has to show up to work every single day. They have to get out of their house and they have to go into work. Now, someone who's, let's say, working in the electronical tower that kind of pushes the buttons for the train, right? You know, that person necessarily doesn't come into contact with the public. So the roles, responsibilities, expectations are different, right? I want to be sure that, you know, that we're not mixing apples and oranges, right? Because there are some roles that are just very people facing, while other roles are administrative back office operations, right? So I think that when we think about equity with our staff, I think the roles that our staff is performing, it's really tough to create an equitable practice where if one person has to go into the office and the other doesn't have to, right? I think it's important for us to think really broadly about that, right? And now at the staff level, it doesn't feel that way, right? Because they're like, well, I want to work from home too, but your role is a different type of role. And we need you to be people facing. So I think that, you know, we could talk all day about equitable practices, Martha, but I think that that's just, you know, a little example that I wanted, you know, to provide. That's just like, and you mentioned your daughter, my daughter works in healthcare, right? She has to go into the office every single day. She has to go in every day. She's people facing, right? But then she says, you know, The administrative staff, they get to work from home, and I understand. I have to, I have to meet with the patients, and they don't. So yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that, Martha. Thank you. And just want to touch back a little bit on retaining employees, right? Because it's become such a big theme with our clients, and looking for ways to identify how do we keep staff engaged. And of course, that's a high priority, right? We all want to keep our best staff members happy and with us, right? So I think just let me highlight a few items of what we're seeing in the market. And I would love to hear, from other folks about, ways that things that they're doing to help retain their staff, right? So again, we were just kind of talking about that flexible work schedule, and that specifically, excuse me, like for the business office, right? So hybrid models, remote work capabilities, some work-life balance is kind of what we're seeing in the market as well. Another thing that we're hearing that talent wants a lot of is a lot of organizational collaboration, right? Not just kind of sitting directly in their department. Yes, they have a role, but they want that collaboration with other members throughout the entire school or organization, as well as strong career progression. And I think it's important to talk about that up front when you're hiring new staff. What does career mapping look like in this role, right? If you hire an accounting manager, what's the next step? Is it a senior accounting manager? Is it a controller? So being really clear and intentional about what career progression looks like. And then going back to what I talked about earlier, and just a sense of belonging and being heard within an organization is really critical too. And I'll tell you, comp and benefits was at the bottom of that list. When we talk with potential candidates about, tell me, what is it that's going to keep you with an organization? That flexible work schedule, collaboration, a sense of belonging, and career progression were like top 2 on the list, with us kind of being in the market. Yeah, I'll pause there for any comments.
So I have something to add if I can jump in.
Sure.
So as a test case, so not my department, same building, accounting related at least, it's not school related, so I apologize, but 2 employees working for a senior director, both wanted to continue to work from home. But the leader of that, not necessarily the company's policy, but the leader says, no, we really should work in the office. And at first they kind of like griped about it. They both left, they're gone.
Yeah.
No chance to remedy it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, wow. And they got a huge raise, so they got rewarded for it. So like, I mean, talk about fear.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's, thank you for providing that example, Darryl. 2020 has proven to the world that business can go on and you don't have to be in the office, right? It's kind of like it was great that, we were able to pivot and do that, but then in some, sectors, not so great, right? I think that, but for like, if we're focusing on business office, administrative offices, right? That flexibility, it actually turned people into being more productive working from home. That's what the statistics are saying. That's what the data is saying, right? Although we're working more from home, we're working longer hours, right? Because we get up and you come 10 feet, in your home, and you're sitting in your office, and you sit at your laptop at 7, and then you're off of it around 7. That's a 12-hour workday. We're eating lunch and breakfast, at our desk and all of that. But, I think it's important that when we think about, for example, when we think about finance and accounting, right? We're seeing an increase in turnover in those roles, and we've never seen it this high before, right? And I apologize if, there aren't any finance and accounting folks on this call, but, if we, that finance and accounting was always between 1% and 3% less than the national average, and now it's creeping up. And then a new report just came out that millions of people are supposed to resign in their jobs early 2022. So here we are again with another, pivotal moment that's going to happen in the talent market. We've always seen in January, people want to make a move. People want to look at new opportunities, but coupled with what's happening already in the market, I fear that it will get just a little bit more volatile than what it is right now. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. Martha, you have anything to add? You look like you're thinking.
Well, I'm always thinking. And I'm thinking about what you're saying, and then I'm thinking about some of the conversations that we've just been having a lot of. And certainly, with schools and the remote work, there's just an awful lot of discussion. I think this is discussion that we're going to keep having, both with existing employees and with potential employees, and adapting to a culture that prior to COVID, there was not there. Working remotely was definitely the exception and not the rule. And then again, this is a classic case of a workplace where there's a significant number of people that really must be on campus, because we have learned the importance of being in person. That was one thing that we really did learn, as far as, having, being together. Certainly there are some benefits, when you can do some remote learning, but we've learned the importance of being together and the power of that in education. And so you have all the forward-facing faculty and staff that need to be there. And then we have in the business office and administrative positions, people that can maybe be more productive remotely. So I think we really are the poster child for grappling with that, and how you have very different needs within an organization, and how do we communicate that? I mean, if you can't hire somebody because they all want to work remote, which I hear in accounting, that's a big challenge for us.
Sure.
And our cultures, it's a big challenge.
Sure.
So, I think we kind of are a great example of that.
Yeah, thank you.
William, this is Beth Drake. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I am a CFO, and actually, I've worked in many places, and admin accounting functions in some organizations are completely in a different location, because it's a back office functionality and generally doesn't need to be forward facing with externals, customers. I mean, to me, anybody that talks to me is my customer, at the time. But it's not an uncommon practice. Some people cannot believe this, but the accounting function is not even in the same location. And so it's not even a new concept, actually, that they not be around. There's not, there's a warm and fuzzy thing that's artificial for a processor to be available, in person. We're processors, processors. There's also a functionality that I've seen where processing in one location I used to work, the data processors came in at night. We didn't even know them. This was manual. This was back in the olden days when there was manual, but there was a pile of stuff outside their location to be processed at night. And as long as you gave it to them correctly, they processed it overnight, and your transactions were processed, were done. So this is not really a new concept. It's kind of turning it sideways, given the situation.
I think it's new. It's new to some schools, Beth. So I agree with you.
No, I'm saying it's new because but I'm not talking about the school environment. This is, schools have a warm and fuzziness of them, but I mean, and I've worked in all kinds of industries, but it's something that's it's very productive, can be considered more productivity, sorry. Like you said, you do more, but anyway, I'm just kind of giving a little perspective. I'm processor, I cross all industries. So I'm
Right.
like, so
Well,
it's actually new in most industries because people forgot that this is how it has been.
and that makes it more, and you know, the other thing that makes it very challenging as we think about hiring, and I know your point is good. What you just said was you cross all industries. Octavia and I've talked about this. When you're hiring an accountant, you're competing against across industries.
That is
Yeah.
absolutely correct. Yes. And Beth, thank you so much for providing insight. That was awesome. And, you know, I love what she said. You know, it's not a new concept, right? But I think that when it starts kind of filtering over into sectors that had not experienced it before, it feels so unfamiliar, right? So not just, you know, schools, we talk about nonprofit organizations that have never, you know, really looked at having, you know, their administrative office work from home, right? Until the pandemic. And now it's totally turned on its heels, and now we're starting to see a flurry of, you know, talent saying, I want to stay the way I want it to stay the way that it is, because for reasons that, you know, work-life balance, I get to spend more time with my family, I'm more productive for whatever those reasons are. So yeah, so Beth, thank you for adding that. Yeah, adding that insight. So something else, Martha?
I'm curious as to what you're seeing, or if you're seeing like what types of changes you're seeing in the hiring process. Has the hiring process changed in reaction to, obviously, there's a lot more remote interviewing, that kind of thing, but just sort of the timeline, the process, the interaction people are expecting?
Yeah, great question. And I will tell you, you know, before the pandemic, we thought that our process that we partner with our clients, we thought that process was efficient, right? We work with organizations that have multi-locations and people in different offices. So we had already incorporated video interviews into our process a long time ago to fit the tight schedules of our clients and all of the staff that, you know, the new candidate has to meet with. So that's been a part of our process for a long time. But now, just to share, I'm telling you, we have had to really educate our clients and say, okay, once we've identified candidates, we have to do the entire interview process in no less than 7 business days. We have to be fast and we have to be furious. And so that's why with each partnership that we step into, we provide a guideline as to what that process is going to look like. We understand who your hiring committee is, who the candidate has to meet with. We understand what type of platform you want a video interview on, whether it's Zoom, whether it's Microsoft Teams, whether it's Google Meet, and we set out a very detailed process, and we don't negate from that. I will tell you, I just had a client that negated from that because they were unsure about a candidate. The client wanted to keep spinning their heels and thinking about this candidate and wanted to take the candidate to a next step. And guess what happened? The candidate said, no, thank you. I've had 3 rounds of interviews. If they're not sure about me now, they never will, and took another job. So it's kind of like you really have to make sure that and it's not just, yeah, it's a candidate's market right now, but we're here to serve our clients as well. So we also look at that on the other side of the spectrum too, that if we identify a candidate that has a lot of activity going on and knows that, you know, that they have a lot of interest in the market and has a lot in their pipeline, we won't even entertain them. So thank you for that question, Martha. Good question.
And you know, one of the other things I think a lot of people on this call are experiencing as a change is that schools used to have a hiring cycle. And now it has become year-round hiring. And I know that it's exhausting, and it's just, they're not necessarily set up to do it. So they really have to look at everything now differently.
Yeah, it's true. And there are also cycles in the market that, you know, that, you know, most people who don't do, you know, talent management aren't aware of. So like the end of year, the last 3 months is like, that is a time when if you have a role, if you do not get into the market by September, don't do it, wait till January. Because what happens is you post your opportunity, you're not really making any traction, and then you could possibly burn the market if that role is still open in the following year. So anything that we get in now with our clients, we still have clients coming to us wanting to engage us in searches. Anything we get in December, we save until January, because what's going to happen, the activity is not going to be there, the holidays are coming up, and we don't want to burn the market for our clients. Yeah. Good points, Mother. Thank you. Daryl, you can move on to the next slide. Is Daryl frozen? I think Daryl is frozen. Oh, there he is. Daryl, can you hear us?
I can hear you. Sorry, I was frozen.
Oh, yeah, I thought you were. I thought you were, yeah.
That Zoom, it's good until you freeze.
Would you mind moving to the next slide, Daryl? Thank you. Oh, I think we're frozen again. Oh, there he is again.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay, excellent. So last but not least, I think it's important for us to talk about the costs associated with turnover, right? Just so that we all kind of have an idea about what it really kind of costs when someone resigns from your business office or your school, right? And so because it's critical to the life cycle of like staffing your business office or your school, right? Understanding what those costs that are associated when someone steps away. So the example that I have to give you is, so let's just say a mid-level employee resigns. Typically turnover cost is 70% of their annual salary. And I'm gonna break that down for you too. So when an employee resigns unexpectedly, right? What happens is the responsibilities of that person, right, goes to about 1 to 2 employees, right? So those employees take on the responsibilities of that person who just left, right? If you don't have a direct interim resource to come in immediately, right? And so those 2 employees take on the burden of that gap in operations until the role is filled, right? So let's just say a mid-level manager earning $62,000 a year, right? And let's say hypothetically the role turned over in 1 year. The total cost to refill that role at 70% will be $106,000. $106,000 for a $60,000 role. Now, to break it down even further, let's consider what those costs include, right? So one is calculating the daily cost of covering the vacancy, right? That's one. The hiring manager's daily rate you have to take into consideration as well, right? Because you're spreading that responsibility across 1 to 2 people, and then the hiring manager has to take time out of their day to help with interviewing people, right? And then you have your cost of advertising, social media, LinkedIn, if you're posting the job, if there's a cost associated with that. Then you have resume screening, which takes up productivity time, phone and in-person interviews, more productivity time, and then you have your background and reference checks, and sometimes there's a cost associated if you're using a third party. So all of that rolled up into that, that's where you get the costs for turnover. And let's not forget, time to fill is the biggest contributor as well. You know, before the pandemic and before the market went all volatile on us, you know, it would typically take 40 to 50 to 60 days to fill one job, right? And that's just job posting, no recruiting whatsoever. You're just posting a job and applicants are applying, right? 40 to 60 days. Now we're talking anywhere between 80 and 120 days. I'll take a pause there for questions. Questions, comments, reactions, happiness, sadness.
Well, just think about if you have multiple people leaving at the same time.
That's right.
that
That's
might
right.
even be magnified even worse.
That's
know.
right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's
Well, and
right.
I wonder about the, just the effect on morale
Mhm.
when, at a time like this, particularly where, we're seeing more openings than we're used to
Yep.
at times of the year that is different.
Mhm.
And how it makes people feel
Yeah.
and what that does to other productivity. So Margaret just asked a question, does the 106,000 include a placement fee if you use a recruiter, or would the placement fee be on top of that?
Right. So if you used a talent partner, what you do is you reduce some of the costs that go into that $106,000. That's the difference, right? So, for example, if you are advertising, that your talent partner is going to do that advertising for you because those costs are included, right? That resume screening, phone and in-person, that talent partner is going to do all of that for you. So there are key pieces to this where your talent partner is going to take on the burden that you normally would. Yeah.
Katie?
So we are looking for someone in our communications department, and we are finding just no candidates. And we're baffled. Like before, we would get like 30 or 40 because we filled this position before.
Mhm.
And so the tricky part is you don't know who's not applying, and you don't know why they're not applying. And so we're trying to figure out, like, how do you even come up with a new strategy, because we don't know if it's like what we're paying them or the qualifications, or that it's not remote work, or
Mhm.
so this has been our challenge, is that
Yeah.
when you just don't have applicants and you don't know why you don't have
Yeah.
applicants.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Katie. And I will tell you, you are not you're not in this alone. You're not in this alone. Everyone's been experiencing that as well. And I think, what's important to do, and I would love, if you're interested to kind of take this offline, we could have a follow-up conversation. Just, I could give you some insight into your position description, right? Into your compensation, right? Whenever we with a client, we also run a compensation analysis to ensure that the compensation is competitive in the marketplace, right? So that's going to tell you what that level of candidate is currently making, right? So, and it's just the market, right? The resignations are not that not everyone is jumping to new jobs. People just don't want to work. People are not working. People are not working. They don't want to work. That's part of the issue as well, right? And I will tell you, this year alone, I read some studies, 2021, they're also calling it the year of the entrepreneur. People are going on contract. People don't want to be W-2s anymore. They want to be contractors because you make more money and you have more flexibility, right? You get to pick and choose when you go in the office, how much work you do, how many hours you put in. So, that's kind of what we're seeing in the market right now as well. Yeah.
I wanted to share with Katie, this is Beth. Sorry, Lisa, I see your hand up. I'll be really quick. We're looking for a communications person too, so just stay away. No, I'm kidding. We are looking for direct, but I wanted to share real quickly that we did we have experienced the great resignation at our little small nonprofit over here, school in Temple, and everybody left for a different reason. And because my staff, like you guys were saying, or like Octavia said, my staff was like, what's going on? People are leaving. I said, everybody's leaving for a different reason,
Yeah.
And
Yep.
a couple of them did leave without secure situations following. And one of them is to start their own business. One of us, I'm just going to go to England for a month to help my sister move there. And then, and you're like, what? So that's what is there something underneath about the organization? Potentially, but it is true that everybody had their own situation.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So Lisa had her hand up.
Good afternoon. I did. Hi, Beth.
Hi.
And hi, everyone.
Hi,
Hi.
Lisa.
We have had 2 leave in the last 6 weeks. 2 employees, 2 key employees leave in the last 6 weeks. And, we do exit interviews, and the top 2 reasons that they were attracted, first of all, folks are offering different perks that are attractive to employees that have children and that require and want a flexible schedule. And unfortunately, we didn't have that available at this time, but we need to start having that conversation. But a flexible work schedule that increased their work-life balance in conjunction with being paid more money was a non-negotiable for them. It made it very hard for them to say no, even though they have an allegiance to their current workplace and they enjoy the work environment. The next offer, being tapped for that next offer, was more attractive to them than staying with some place that they felt that they liked. But yeah, the money and the work-life balance, we're not able to compete with that at this time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing. And that's exactly what is happening in the market. And I think what's also important to recognize too is that it's cross sectors. Sectors are crossing over, right? So it's no longer, if you're a nonprofit, we want someone with nonprofit experience. No. The private industry is coming into nonprofit and saying, guess what? We can pay you more money. We can do this, we can do that. And that's how they're getting them. And then a lot of organizations are now hiring talent partners, right? Because they say, we know that just posting the job, we're not going to be successful. We need someone who's going to direct recruit for this person. And that's why you're seeing a lot of people are just kind of moving out, because guess what? You have recruiters from everywhere contacting your staff because they have an opportunity. Again, there are over 10 million jobs open, right? So you have people contacting you on LinkedIn, emailing you, texting you, Facebook, Instagram. It's all over the place where, initially you're like, no, thank you, I'm happy where I am. And then you get that one recruiter that is so persuasive, that is speaking your language, that you just have to entertain it. Yeah, and I think the impact that it has on your staff that's still there, I think it's important to have those conversations, right? And that kind of leads to the competitive edge that I kind of want to just highlight. And I know we only have 2 minutes left, but it's the competitive edge is taking a deeper look at your succession plan, right? Don't wait until something happens, right? Do it in the beginning, right? Make sure that there's some good cross training in your departments, in your business office, in your HR function. Make sure that there's good cross training. So if someone leaves the organization, you definitely have reinforcements, but you have to remember to reward those employees that are stepping up to the plate to help you with that need as well, right? So I think that for organizations that don't have the staff that can easily step in, looking at a good interim resource to help you fill that gap when unexpected turnover happens also helps to level productivity in those departments as well. So that's it for what I wanted to, kind of highlight for you all. Any lasting questions, comments, reactions? It's been so great having this discussion with you all.
And
It's Beth again. Last thing. My encouragement to everyone is as you have this turnover, I'm realizing I've taken over that half of that person, we're juggling for our open position. But what's been good is we've been able to identify opportunities for improvement that Fresh Eyes brought. So I'm just saying, capitalize on the opportunity while it's really hard because you're doing so many things, and I'm a year old in this organization. So I survived the first year, and now I'm kind of getting my feet and able to give fresh eyes to stuff. And so I encourage everybody to take this opportunity.
You're right. You're absolutely right that it's an opportunity to look at how things may need to change to address what the current situation is going forward. And I do want to just say, well, first of all, thank you, Daryl and Octavia. It's always a really good conversation and we look forward to more. Please, if anybody has topics that they feel like they would like to cover with either this group or in any other kind of professional development, please let me or Andrea know. And also, you know, we do talk about some of these things in the Wednesday HR call, which is pretty much every Wednesday afternoon at 4, and you're welcome to attend that. And that information should be on the website with the Zoom link. We do talk about things like relooking at our employee benefits. We talk about what, you know, addressing maybe the need to change our hiring process / timelines, those types of things, which is where I've learned to ask these questions. I've learned it from all of you and the discussions that I'm having with all of you. And my strong encouragement is that we keep having these discussions together, because this is just, it's just changing all the time. And the best support we have is each other and resources like Octavia and Daryl. So.
Well, thank you so much for having us. It's been such a pleasure, Martha, and I look forward to joining more sessions. And if anyone has any questions, please, my email address, Daryl's email address is up on the screen. More than happy to answer any questions that you have. Happy to have just an informational conversation with you as well. Happy to provide guidance on whatever is going on within your organization. So please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We would love to help.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you all. Happy Wednesday.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.